welcome to episode 7 of the Zesty Dietitian podcast. I'm your host, Mackenzie Caldwell, registered dietitian nutritionist. In this episode, I am so excited to be interviewing my lovely friend and colleague, Reem Saed. She went to Chapel Hill with me for graduate school. I believe she was the year below me. And she also did her lactation consultant training there as well. So we're both registered dietitians, and she has that added training as a lactation consultant. The same training that my associate dietitian and lactation consultant Natalie has, which is so cool. Reem is just a wealth of knowledge and information and passion for women's health, which we love so freaking much, all rooted in the social justice mentality. So I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. A little bit more about Reem. Reem is a registered dietitian and international board certified lactation consultant who runs her private practice Rooted Nutrition and Lactation in the Triangle area of North Carolina. Her goal is really simple: help mothers breastfeed. The problem is that in this day and age, it isn't so simple anymore. She uses her education in nutrition, exercise science, public health, and lactation to approach families in a holistic way to help them meet their feeding goals. So get ready. Let's dive into this interview with Reem. Thank you so much, Reem, for joining us today. I'm so excited to chat more with you. How's your week been going so far? I guess it's Monday morning.
Pretty good. I feel like usually Monday mornings, they hit you like a ton of breaks, but it's been good. It's been a good morning, so.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to jump into all things nutrition and lactation today, but my first question for you is something that I ask all of my patients, and that is, what are some of your favorite foods?
I love eating. So like everything is fair game for me. I was thinking about this question because I figured there's probably some food questions coming. The only food that I will like not really mess with is oatmeal.
Oh,
like,
wow.
I cannot get into oatmeal. I don't know what, everything else though, like all different types of cultural food. Like I grew up going to like hole in the walls, like family owned, like random ethnicity or nationalities restaurants. So I have a diverse palate. I'd say like off the top of my head, my two favorite: French fries, eggplant parmesan.
Love. Those are great. They're both like crispy, salty.
That's everything I'm about.
Yeah, that sounds really good right now. Awesome. And what are some of your favorite ways to move your body?
I think the ego in me wants to say running, because I used to be able to run, but I'm just like not in that phase of life.
Yeah.
So I do love running, but I'm just not really doing it much right now. And then like I love a good walk. I really do love a good walk, especially with my toddler, because we can just like, I don't know, look at the worms, or it's just it's such a nice, especially when the weather's out or weather's nice out. It's such a nice way to like kind of slow down. And then just I love strength training as well, and it really depends on my mood. I'm trying to get more into that like cycle training, if you know what I'm talking about.
Where you like doing different things at the different times of your menstrual cycle.
Yeah. So just like reading my body. If I feel like doing something more intense, all right, let's go do some cardio, some strength, or like maybe when I'm like actually on my period, I'll just do some yoga, that kind of thing. So honestly, all of it. I love all of it. My undergrad is exercise science. I don't know if you know that.
I don't think I knew that. That's cool.
Yeah. So like I love exercise. I really do.
Yeah.
Contrary to what I do currently.
You know what? That's okay. We can love exercise and also just like recognize where we're at in life. And it sounds like you're moving, which is great. That's awesome.
Somewhere. I'm doing something.
Yeah. How old is your toddler?
She's she'll be 3 in January. So she's like,
so you're also chasing around your toddler.
Yeah.
Also, toddlers are heavy.
Yeah. And we don't make them small. Like I'm not a petite person. I'm 5'9". My husband's 6'5", and like she's in 5T clothing.
Oh my God.
So we're not, this is not one of those like, oh, you're so cute. She's like, what's up? Our goal is to create our own basketball team, so we'll see.
I love that. It sounds like you're well on your way. That's awesome. Yeah, something I tell my patients all the time is like, okay, yeah, like walking is great exercise. It's also so great for your mental health, especially if you're like focusing on it being such a mindful, like in the moment activity, like it sounds like you're doing. That's awesome. And people don't realize how much strength it takes to just like be a parent.
Oh my, and that's the thing is that I always hear from my parents like, oh, they're too big for me to carry or like to baby wear
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And I feel like there's evidence to show too, like parents who baby wear are healthier long term.
Oh,
And so
wow.
it's like a form of exercise. Like if your body can't keep up with your kid, then that tells us we need to nourish your body in a different way, I think, because it's
I think
just
so too.
like, you got to keep up with this little.
Yeah. And, like there's like ability that's like sometimes out of our control. But
Sure.
if you're generally able-bodied, we want you to be able to chase after your kid. That's like just
Yeah.
a form of functional movement.
Yeah,
That's so cool. I loved like sharing that baby wearing is a thing with some of my patients. It feels like just like this cultural practice that we've kind of gotten out of touch with over the
Yeah.
centuries, but we've been doing it since the dawn of time.
It's the dawn of time. It's like literally the only way to parent. I say that all the time. I don't even care if it's your first. I mean, it definitely if you have multiples, like I'm not really sure how people are parenting without baby wearing, but maybe that's just my lens as like I have a really like sensitive kiddo. She is still like literally will suctions her face to my face, like wants all the skin to skin.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe that's like a personal thing, but yeah. I think baby wearing, it's so great for both of our regulatory systems, and I view it as like a form of exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I've had patients with a newborn talk about like just having a very I forget what the term is, but essentially their child is very clingy, sounds like similar to yours,
Yeah.
having difficulty cooking or preparing their own meals, I'm like, wear your baby, please.
You gotta lean in, baby. Lean into the cling. And like
into the cling.
that's my approach. But I'm very crunchy and like attachment parenting style. I mean, my patients know like I'm all about like if your baby's telling you what they want, just lean in, baby. I think in our culture we're really encouraged to like this is how we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
You're gonna fall asleep at 7 p.m. and like my kiddo is Arab. We're trying to go out at 7. So like, so it's just different.
It's in her blood.
It really is. She comes alive when we go overseas. It's hilarious.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I love it. Well, tell me, so we went to school together. I'm wearing my North Carolina nutrition sweatshirt right now. But tell me more about how you decided to be a dietitian and a lactation consultant. How did you get to this?
Okay, so we took a nutrition across the life cycle course, like our first semester of our dietetic training. And we started with infant or like prenatal, preconception, and then we got into like infant nutrition. And I remember Dr. Wasser, I hope I'm saying that right, Heather Wasser, she started talking about breast milk and it's important and like all of the benefits of it. And I was flabbergasted. I mean, I'm a relatively educated woman. And I had never heard of like the impact of breast milk and like how important it is for someone's health and all these like amazing components in it and all of that. And so I literally in that class, I was asking so many questions. She was like, Reem, I need to finish this class. Please stop asking questions. Meet me afterwards, like in front of the whole class. And I would like to say that was the last time someone ever said that to me in my career, but that's not true. So anyways, I met up with her afterwards and she's like, you seem interested. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And I've always been that person who like loves babies and kids. Like I would leave my friends and like go hang out with their kids. Like we would go to the park with my friends before I had children. I would do all the baby wearing. Like I would change their diet. Like I love babies and kids. And so she's like, hey, have you looked into this IBCLC program we have at UNC? You can coordinate it or like connect it with your RD program. And I just kind of like under her guidance, just like did the program, figured out how to add it to my RD. And I feel like the two married really well together because I mean, breastfeeding is just infant nutrition, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of was just a whirlwind. I was honestly just in such a privileged position because at UNC I was able to combine them. They already had both programs. And I wasn't the first to do it. It was very regular for like RDs to adding their IBCLC. And so it was really like seamless.
I love that. And I love Heather Wasser. She was my advisor in undergrad.
Oh, same. Oh,
yeah.
I have the biggest, I have the biggest crush on her still.
I hope she listens to this because same.
Send it directly to her.
She's awesome. If anybody's listening to this and is like going to go to grad school at UNC, and just find her. She's
Find
great.
her. She's
Yeah,
so cool.
she's amazing.
She's married to Hagrid. I don't know if you've seen her. So
No, really?
It's Hagrid. It's wild. Like, I think even she, like, says it. Like, it's not just, like, my... Okay, sorry.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I fell in love with maternal nutrition in my life cycle class. I did nutrition in undergrad. But so back then I didn't have to end up having to take it. I'm so mad though that I didn't get to take Heather Wasser's class. I think I had her in like a different class, but life cycle nutrition is just like such a fun way to figure out like where you want to focus as a dietitian. It just exposes you to every like nutrition across the lifespan, all the different kind of areas. So that's super cool. I love that. So now that you are a lactation consultant, when should somebody seek out help from an IBCLC? Or you maybe even just tell us a little bit more about like what you actually do as an IBCLC, and then when should someone seek you out?
I once had a patient tell me lactation consultant is a misnomer. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you're like a mommy helper, infant developer, something like that. And I took it as a compliment, hopefully, but that's a great question because I think most people don't know what lactation consultants do. Mm-hmm. So to answer the first part, when should they see us? Prenatally, really? Like, please, when you're pregnant, reach out. My like sweet spot I found is around 30 weeks because it's not so early that you're gonna forget everything I'm telling you, but it's not so late that I've missed your baby shower. And I like to get to my parents before they finalize that registry because there's a lot of products out there that are honestly just like predatory, and it's not going to help support their goals. And so I like to kind of like address it beforehand. And then we lay down some groundwork, especially during my class. I talk a lot about like birth prep. Mm-hmm. I find that it just really matters when it comes to breastfeeding and like how you birth. So yeah, as early as possible, I would say. Most insurances cover it. I just think people don't know that. Mm-hmm. Now, what does the IBCLC do? Really depends on like the situation, man. But it depends on the LC that you're meeting with. The unfortunate reality, and I think this can be said for most careers, they're not all made the same. And a lot of times people are seeing me as the second, third, sometimes fourth LC, and they haven't had really much progress or, I guess, results. And so I really focus on like oral function in the baby. And so I'm giving exercises. I'm seeing how is that tongue working, on the breast, off the breast, with the bottle, just at rest too. That can tell me. I really look at babies like overall body tension. We give some movements and exercises to help with that. I look at like mom's inflammation, like how is her health? Did she hemorrhage? Are there things we need to like address? If she's having a low supply, there's things that we can also, lab work that we can do to interpret. Now, I'm saying this like not every LC goes this in depth, but there's a reason I'm doing my own private practice because I think holistically this is what parents need. And we're seeing so many struggles with breastfeeding because I think we're eating and living in such an unnatural human way. Is that the best way to word it? I don't know.
I kind of know what you're trying to say. Kind of like what I like to say to my patients is we're communal creatures. We're supposed to be living in community with a lot more support than we currently have. And we don't American culture in general is just very independent. Yeah. And that is not good for postpartum parents. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
And it's even goes like in the scientific realm, like there's a lot of metabolic dysfunction that we are living with, just chronic diseases now. There's a lot of like I don't know how you word, because you're more savvy with these wordings, like overweight children. And so that's going to affect their puberty, and then it's going to affect how their mammary tissue develops, which might affect how their breastfeeding like supply is later down the road. And so, or we have a lot of like IVF patients, right? And no like shame in the game when it comes to IVF, but the reality is a lot of the same hormones you need to get pregnant, you need for sufficient supply. And so if we're having more IVF pregnancies, we're going to see more postpartum complications with things, right? So I feel like we're in a time where people want to go back to breastfeeding, but like our health is almost not allowing us to, or I
Right.
shouldn't say health. Maybe our environment isn't really
Yeah.
supporting that as much.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to clarify to anybody who's like, oh my God, I was overweight as a kid, I'm never going to be able to breastfeed. That's not
No,
what we're saying.
not at
What we
all.
are saying is that there's so many factors that contribute to our well-being. Some of them are in our control, some of them aren't. And for example, PCOS might lead to weight gain in some people. And we know that the PCOS itself is kind of more what might be actually affecting your ability to successfully breastfeed, whereas the weight itself might not necessarily be part of that. Sometimes people with diabetes happen to be in larger bodies, but sometimes they don't too.
Yeah.
And that can affect
It's like
how
it all comes down
breastfeeding
to
happens.
insulin resistance. So that's
Yep.
really what I like to focus on, the actual insulin resistance.
I don't think
Not
I
so-
realized how much insulin resistance affected breastfeeding. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so oh man, I'm gonna nerd out a little bit, but I'm
Yeah,
also
please do.
I feel like I'm not the best person, but I'll tell you what I know. So the breast, like breast tissue is an endocrine organ. And so like if your body's insulin resistant, your breast will also be insulin resistant. And that affects its growth because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're insulin resistant, you're also like your growth hormone, your body is not able to.
Yeah, there's something called
Or-
insulin-like growth hormone that affects like a ton of different cells in the body.
Yeah, and so it will affect how
Or
your breast
insulin-like growth
tissue-
factor, IGF.
growth.
That
That, I
one.
know what you're talking about. We're somewhere in science. We're in the realm.
Yep.
And so that can affect how not just how your breast tissue grows, but it's how it's affected by like any hormones. And so your letdown may be impacted, or like just your supply might be really slow going because we really have to kind of like work on these receptors and get them to start like responding to your milk. So yeah, it's all really tied. And I think the saddest part, I think maybe this is something you might ask later, so tell me to stop talking now. But
That's okay. We go whatever order we want.
when I was like, getting trained, I feel like the rhetoric was very much, it's very rare to have a low supply. People rarely have like supply issues. There's rarely these hormonal issues. But in practice, I'm seeing that more often than not. And so it's this real like dissonance of like, this is how I was trained, but now I've got to take all these courses and learn all these things because that's just not the reality out in the world, I think. And maybe it is. Maybe it's just the moms that are reaching out to me or parents that are reaching out to me, but I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. It could be the case, like when we're doing our basic training, even as dietitians, and I'm guessing it's probably the same as lactation consultants, you're getting prepared to work at WIC where you're seeing literally everybody, or in the hospital where you're seeing literally everybody. But sometimes the people that end up reaching out to somebody in private practice have like been through the ringer. They're like, I need more than basic at this point. So then sometimes we end up seeing more cases of like complex stuff, which is fun for us.
Yeah.
We love the puzzles.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I don't think I realized that. And I think I talk a lot about insulin resistance with my patients while they're pregnant. And then I say in postpartum, I just want you to eat. You do need more protein while you're breastfeeding for sure. And it's important for healing, but I want you to breathe. I want you to just get food in your body and stay hydrated and try to get as much sleep as you can. And then we'll connect you to a lactation consultant if anything's coming up.
Yeah.
But I think it's just an extra motivation to know that we're not just doing this like so that we're preventing macrosomia or a very large baby in pregnancy. There's other things that this blood sugar management
100%.
could help with
100%.
in like immediately in postpartum too. So that's cool to know.
Yeah.
What are some big breastfeeding myths that you find yourself busting for your patients all the time?
Like just point and it's a myth. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so people assume that it should be painful. It should not be painful.
No.
We have a lot of like perceived low milk supply. So parents will assume, oh, my baby's doing, ABC. It must be because I'm not making enough. And I find that so many of my parents are not well versed on infant development and just normal infant like interactions. Like certain time, and I feel like I like never hear providers talk about growth spurts. Maybe it's because they're not like evident. I don't know if they are evidence based or not. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But there's always these certain times where parents are like, oh my gosh, like it's been such a rough couple days, or I don't know if you've heard of like the second night syndrome.
I don't think I have.
Okay, so like the first 24 hours you have your baby, they're like a sleepy potato. They're literally just like, what the heck just happened? And then the second night, they're like, who the heck evicted me? And they start realizing they're outside of their nice, comfy womb. And so they have this second night syndrome where it's really, they're just like crying for a span of time, sometimes like midnight to like 4 a.m. or just like a certain concentrated amount of time. And all they want to do is latch. And parents, because parents think, oh my gosh, they won't stop crying. It must be because I'm dry, like I don't have enough milk. And so they often add formula at this time. However, what's really happening is that your baby is dysregulated because they just got evicted. Your baby is also hungry, but they're also putting in that like Amazon order for their Amazon milk to come in 2 days. And so they do that by stimulating, but then they also want to regulate themselves. And so I think a lot of us, especially in like American society, we're very like, we want to see the tangible output of our whatever, our efforts.
Yeah.
And babies just want to sometimes suck for comfort. It's not all about nutrition. It's not all about like getting this milk out. Your baby wants to be close to you.
Yeah.
It's, and like I think sometimes people really don't realize that like these attachment needs that babies have are just as valid as like pooping, peeing, eating needs, right? Like it literally helps build their brain, but people don't realize that. And so I think a lot of, especially new parents, are like shocked by just normal infant development because no one's really talking about it.
Yeah.
So that would be a myth that kind of ties into breastfeeding. A big myth I also hear is like, oh, it takes 3 to 5 days postpartum for your milk supply to transition. And so people are like shocked by that because they're like, I have milk as soon as I have my baby? And I'm like, no, honey, your baby's full like serving is like a tablespoon. You're not gonna feel half a tablespoon in your breast of milk. Like it's not that much, but it's all your baby needs. And so people don't realize that, one, it takes a few days for that supply to transition, and two, that they don't need to give formula in the meantime. You actually need to be latching as much as possible because it helps build those receptors in your brain, and then it builds this really amazing supply moving forward. But I think a lot of times people are like almost waiting to see the tangible result of that milk and then let me latch. But if we wait to do that, those receptors die off. And so your supply never is quite as, I don't want to say never, right? People's bodies do amazing things, but
Yeah.
you really got to kind of like be gung-ho about it from the beginning.
Yeah.
To really build those receptors, build that supply. And I think people kind of like, oh, well, let me like see how it's going to go. And
we gotta just try. Putting the baby to the breast is like really one of those big supply stimulators.
Yeah. It's like, I want to say it's not rocket science. In some ways it is, but like sometimes we really have overcomplicated things. Like we just got to put baby to breast, right?
Yeah.
Before bottles, and like, thank goodness we have formula in bottles, right? Because it's helped so many families, but if that's not your goal, take it off the table until you really need to.
Yep. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. So much. I feel like it has to do with us just being so isolated as a culture and so independent, is that we kind of just like stopped sharing some of this information, which is sad. But I feel like we're growing a little bit. We're starting to like get back to a place where we're like able to talk more about things too, which is good.
I think we're able to talk more about things. I think one of the biggest struggles I have professionally is other healthcare providers. Honestly, especially like pediatricians, OBs, frankly, they give incorrect information and oftentimes really harmful, where a doctor be like, oh, I'm really worried about their weight loss. We've got to add formula. And babies lost like 6%, 7%. We don't need to introduce anything before 10%. And even then, we would start pumping and hand expressing and offering breast milk. Like we don't need to. So it's just, there's so many myths that people have, but I think it's not just parents, it's like also providers.
Yes.
And then they reiterate that kind of like stigma of like, you as a parent don't know enough, you are not fully capable of taking care of your baby on your own, so we need to come in with all of our medical expertise and do the thing for you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's super frustrating. Extremely frustrating. Yeah. I wish that we were a little bit, sometimes we're integrated, right? Sometimes there's lactation consultants that work directly in like a pediatrician's office. Yeah. And I think that's always super helpful. So people especially like need to use their insurance, just need to get in and see somebody super fast. Yeah. But a lot of the times it just gets disconnected. Not ideal. Not ideal.
It's not ideal. It's not.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about milk supply. A lot of my patients are really concerned about their supply. And they'll ask me about foods or supplements that are supposed to help with a healthy supply of breast milk. Let's number one, just talk about the absolute basics of building a supply, right? We just talked about putting baby to breast, but what are our other basics beyond just literally having baby latch and stimulating all of those receptors to get the breast to make milk?
Okay. So I want to add the caveat to that first one where we just add baby to breast, because in our day and age, it's not just about putting baby to breast. It's about baby effectively removing milk. Mm-hmm. A lot of times with our medicalized births, babies are not able to tap into their reflexes as well as they might need to do that. And so I don't want a parent to feel like, well, I am doing that, but you know, it's still not going well, right? There's probably more to it than that. We would need to assess baby's oral function and all of that. Their anatomy, their body, their tension, whatever. So that's kind of like the first thing. The second thing is like effective milk transfer in the form of a pump. Handheld pumps are not as good, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to like share that with everybody, but we need a good like pump size or a flange size, because again, effective milk transfer, the better we're able to effectively remove the milk, the better our body is to respond and refill that cup. So, you know, if you're at a restaurant, the waiter only comes by and fills your water cup if you've taken a sip. Same thing happens for your supply. Like, we need to be removing in order for your brain, to fill it back up. So that's like the second thing. The third thing, I am really struggling with this. I'm going to be honest with you, Mackenzie, because again, I told you, like, I was educated with one thing, where there's no true evidence that any foods impact your supply or increase your supply. Yeah. There's nothing concrete. But now that I'm working in this field and I've kind of like entered the more holistic IBCLC, like, mindset, and so I'm doing that kind of research. I don't know if you know this book. You should totally Mother Food.
No,
you might definitely really want to try that. Food and herbs that promote milk production and a mother's health. Now, have I read it? No. Have I gone through certain sections? Yes. But what I'm seeing is that herbs and supplements really do help. So things like shatavari, goat's rue, milk thistle. Wait, is that the same thing? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think they're different. Goat's rue and milk thistle. I'm pretty sure they're different.
They're different. There's some evidence to support that they actually do help. And so this kind of, we enter into this realm of just because it's not evidence-based doesn't mean that historical ancestral knowledge is not as vital or important. And so I'm finding that I'm having to lean and learn more about that, because I wasn't trained in it. And it's all like courses and books that I'm getting on my own. And so, a lot of times people will talk about like oats helping. And yeah, I think historically that is a true thing. Oftentimes I find parents do better with oats because they're not eating enough carbs. Yeah. And so when they eat more those lactation cookies, there's nothing, typically the lactation cookies don't have that high of a dose of anything to really have like an impact on your supply. But because you're increasing your calories, your body responds better to it. Yeah. So that's like something to be really mindful of. Another thing, obviously, hydration. There's some anecdotal evidence. Like, I don't know what it is about blue Gatorade. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I have.
I just took a class on the thyroid and lactation, and turns out there's studies that the blue dye, what does it do? It like increases your body's response to growth hormone.
No way.
Or something, and that is like how they think it might be impacting supplies and helping. Isn't that crazy?
That's wild. I was thinking that it was probably just because people were hydrating better.
No, it's like specifically blue Gatorade. It's not like the other types of Gatorade. And so, I don't know, maybe try blue Gatorade. But honestly, like the biggest thing is if you're struggling with supply, you need to talk to an IBCLC.
Yeah.
Because we have to do the deep dive and looking at the dyad of like what's going on with parent, what's going on with baby, and figuring out how these puzzle pieces align, or if there is a misalignment, like how can we fix it? Yeah, so when it comes to herbs, like we've kind of moved away as a field, I would like to think, from fenugreek because it can impact thyroid. So a lot of people have thyroid issues, especially postpartum, and so we're moving more towards like shatavari, goat's rue, milk thistle. I believe, again, I'm not a herbalist, like I'm still trying to learn so much. Luna Lactation and Wellness, I believe, she has a whole like database of herbs for lactation. But typically you want like 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams for a therapeutic dose. And then
any of these herbs.
Yeah. And so the thing is though, I wouldn't encourage you to necessarily take it without speaking to an IBCLC because there's certain contraindications. And so it's just important to be mindful of that, right? But the good news is oftentimes with herbs, like you can play around a little bit with it and trial and error more so than like a medication you have to be prescribed.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And then one last thing to kind of increase that supply, hand expression and breast massage. People do not do this. I think we are just as a nation, I mean, I would say probably globally, we are uncomfortable with touching our own bodies, especially as like females, or women, or I don't know. So I really harp that for my patients, especially those early days when you're just making colostrum. Really, like, there's some research to show if you hand express for 5 minutes, 5 times a day, the first 5 days, so 5, it can increase your supply by like 100%. It's like crazy. Whoa. Crazy. Yeah. And so we really got to like help those ducts, like stimulate them, get more milk out. It also helps your baby get more full, and like there's just so many benefits to breast massage, and I feel like we never talk about that. I don't know.
And that's what when my patients will ask me about some of this stuff, I'll say like similar to what you're saying, like might not really do much. It might do something. Yeah. But we got to focus on the absolute basics first, and I want you to talk to a lactation consultant.
For sure.
So if you're like, oh, I want to buy this goat's rue or whatever because I listened to this podcast and I heard about it. Okay, cool. Number 1, pause. Are you eating 3 meals a day, multiple snacks?
Yeah.
Are you drinking at minimum 80 ounces of fluid per day? It could be blue Gatorade if you want it to be, but it could also just be water.
Ooh, and electrolytes.
And electrolytes.
Like, salt in your water of Himalayan or Celtic salt, that I find really helps my parents too.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much, even if you're just like walking outside in the summer and sweating, you're losing a lot of salts. And so if you're losing salts in your sweat, why would you then also not, if your baby is staying hydrated and totally nourished by your breast milk, you've got to be losing electrolytes in your breast milk too. Yeah. We got to build the bottom of the pyramid. I talked about this in a couple of my last podcast episodes. Are you eating? Are you putting baby to breast? Are you drinking your water? If the answer is no, let's try those first. Still see a lactation consultant, please.
Yeah.
Let's try those first. Let's try our hand expression. And then if you want to try these herbal supplements, let's get you connected to somebody who knows what they're doing and can talk to you about the contraindications, talk to you about the correct dose for you, talk to you about brands that are third-party tested and safe, things like that. But willy-nilly stuff on the internet, let's calm down and let's come back to earth for a second.
There's just so much info out there. These poor parents are struggling. People are struggling.
I know. Yeah. And it's not their fault, right? It's a product of our broken healthcare system because we're not getting people connected to the right professionals. So
it's so broken.
Yeah. Well, good to know, especially about fenugreek. I think I hadn't heard that. So that's good for me to know too, for my patients, to steer them in a different direction and say, just please, it's worth it. See a lactation consultant.
Please. And it's like crazy to me. I found, I don't know if we like just like struggle to ask for help or what it is, but like I take most insurance. A lot of LCs take most insurances. Like it's covered, y'all. I don't know what You know what I mean? I don't know if that's like
Yeah,
something.
it's actually here in Charlotte, it's been interesting. Most of the insurance-based lactation consultants are in the hospital. And so
Really?
people will be using the lactation network instead to bill.
Yeah.
So they're not directly paneled. And then it's just another layer of people not feeling certain that they're going to be able to get coverage for their visits. So whenever somebody calls and is like, hey, I see Natalie Ostrowski, our IBCLC is on staff. Like, I need to see her soon. Is she available? And be like, she only works with us on Wednesdays. Now she's out for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm so sorry, but hey, FYI, the lactation network exists and there's all these other people's, and then I'll give them names and let them know about that. But you're right. People don't know, and they also don't know that the lactation network exists if their specific preferred IBCLC doesn't necessarily directly accept insurance.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
But same goes for nutrition counseling. It's a preventive benefit. People aren't aware of that.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Yeah. And then just circling back to you saying oats might help, maybe in and of themselves, but probably just because people are eating a little bit more calories and more carbs.
Yeah.
We talked about insulin resistance when we were first starting this episode, that even if you have insulin resistance, that does not mean that you should not be eating carbs, period. Like, there are absolutely ways to balance your blood sugar and include carbohydrates. Low carb diets are not going to be helpful for breastfeeding.
Yeah. I don't encourage them.
No,
I don't encourage
definitely.
any dieting per se while nursing. I think absolutely we can be mindful of what we're eating, how we're moving our bodies, but especially if we're like past that 6-week phase and we're kind of like starting to consider exercise and bounce back culture. Don't even get me started on that.
I kind of do want to get you started on it, though.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna freaking get riled up. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. And maybe this is very personal for me because like I'm almost 3 years postpartum. My body is not the same. It's not ever going to be the same. And I think that we have just been lied to. And so these moms, they're trying to figure out how the heck to feed their babies. And they're trying to lose weight and fit in this arbitrary pair of jeans that they've decided they have to fit back into. And we're all spiraling, guys. I'm spiraling with you. So, I can't deal. So something I think people don't realize is breastfeeding is an exercise. It's a stressor to the body. And sometimes stressors to the bodies are good, but in moderation. But then when we add exercise to it and we're not eating enough, that is like a great recipe to feel like crap and to actually gain weight while breastfeeding. And so there's this myth, back to your previous question, I'm going to lose weight while I'm breastfeeding. Like maybe 2 of my moms have done that. Like maybe. Most of my parents are gaining weight while they're breastfeeding. And I think that because of this myth, people assume, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me because everybody else is losing weight. It's just frankly not what I see. I'm sorry, the sun is like freaking my lighting. I hope that's not.
It's fine. Okay. It looks like you're like maybe going through an apocalypse, but
I don't know what's going on. My lighting, the sun keeps like coming in and out. Okay, so so you gotta eat enough because we're trying to reduce that stressor on your body.
Yeah.
And like, I should have asked how you prefer for us to like refer to people. Because here's what I want to say, and you tell me what is a better way to word it.
Sure.
Women's bodies, if they are stressed out, if they're not eating enough, our bodies retain fat because of biology. We're supposed to like make babies, feed baby. That's just like what happens. Unlike a man's body where if he like reduces his calories, his body's like, great, let me just build 7 pounds of muscle. I mean, I don't think it's really that exact, but I found specifically with women, we gain more fat if we're not eating enough. Tell me, I mean, what's your take?
Yeah, I would say that like it's not true across the board. Like just because you're reducing your stress doesn't mean you're automatically going to lose weight. But like absolutely, women's bodies are more sensitive to caloric restriction because whether or not you want to have a baby, like let's say you're just a random person listening to this and you're not even ever planning on having children, you're just curious about lactation and you're listening to this, your body doesn't know that you're not planning on having kids or not planning on having them for 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Or you're done having them. It doesn't care. It's constantly in preparation mode just in case. And that's why hypothalamic amenorrhea exists when we don't eat enough, over-exercise, really stressed out. The body's going to shut down the reproductive system. It can also shut down the thyroid. And that sometimes we can actually view weight gain as a protective mechanism, especially if you are actively breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And that weight gain, yes, it's scary. It doesn't feel good. It's not helping you feel like yourself at all in this time where you don't feel like your body is your own, but it might actually be helping you be able to have enough buffer energetically to then be able to provide this tiny human with its sole source of nutrition and fluid.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you.
I don't think people realize how metabolically taxing it is to nurse. And yeah, and then you add exercise on top of it and all of that. And so they usually end up feeling really tired, people, and struggling with their weight and stuff like that. So I always have to tell them to eat more, and they punch me in the face. Then we address it and move on. Whatever.
Metaphorically punch you in the face.
Metaphorically, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. So moving on to kind of just like a whole other category a little bit. We still battle a lot of societal stigma around breastfeeding. I think we've come a long way as a society, and we're kind of in this kind of phase of quote unquote breast is best. But then we also have a lot of unfortunately, what comes with that, some stigma against formula that then makes people feel shame if they can't breastfeed. And there's just like a lot of pressure to make breastfeeding work at all costs. So how do you navigate that with your patients?
It's really hard because it depends situation to situation, because for some parents it is achievable. And so for those parents, we will really try and get this care plan ready to like maximize supply and latching and all of that.
Yeah.
For other parents, that's not the reality.
Right.
And I don't want to say sometimes they need permission to like accept that or like kind of change course, because it's not me giving permission. But it's really difficult because it's such an emotional thing, I think. And people a lot of times to have like this idea, these ideals before ever having their child about how it's going to go. And so you open up the room for more disappointment with those kinds of expectations. I think I try really hard to just validate and see them where they're at. And we talk about like goal setting a lot. So I have, some parents are like, okay, I can try for the next 2 weeks latching 4 times a day. And then let's see how kind of like, does baby gain their strength a bit better? Are we starting to effectively transfer milk? And then let's reassess. And so follow-up care is going to be so important for those more complex dyads, because I can give you a care plan, but I don't want to just leave you to it, because your baby's going to change. You're going to change, right? I think, I don't agree with fed is best. I agree with supported is best. Yeah. Oftentimes, I find my parents are not exclusively breastfeeding or offering breast milk, because at some point along the way, the healthcare system or providers really undermined their abilities or their birthing process or whatever it is. And so most of my parents, I feel like, don't have informed consent. They don't truly know how getting induced might affect their birth. And which might affect breastfeeding. They don't truly know how adding that one bottle during the hospital can escalate things. How just one bottle a day of one bottle ever of formula can affect the gut microbiome indefinitely. So and I don't say that to scare people, but I think it's important to have honest conversations that breast milk is not the same as formula. And as long as we understand that, and you and I are on the same page, the parent, fine, let's figure out the goal that works for your family.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I think people are being told, oh, it's all the same, or it doesn't really matter, or you have to breast, like these like overarching, like really definitive statements, I think is where parents really struggle because it leaves no room for nuance, and we're human beings adapting and evolving, and we need nuance, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard because for some parents too, they want to be pushed in the sense of like, let's do everything we can to make breastfeeding work. And others are flexible. And I feel like I'm seeing more flexibility lately. Where like, okay, like I'm short a bottle, let me give some formula, blah blah blah. Like people are a bit more open to it. I think what I struggle with is when they didn't need to do that and they were told that they did.
Yes.
Or they felt like they did because perhaps they were not educated in a certain development or, whatever it is. I think that's where it really, I don't care how you feed your baby, but I just need it to be informed consent. I need you to know the impacts of your decisions. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm with you on that in a lot of ways. I think we treat pregnant folks and new parents like they're kids and that they don't know what they're doing. And maybe they don't fully, but they can make their own decisions if they have the right information. And we're there to give you the information and help you make the decision that's right for you in so many different aspects within our different scope of practices. At least that's how it should be. For sure.
I'm going to say never. I'm going to go ahead and go with never. Never do I meet a parent who doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
They have all these puzzle pieces. They just don't know how to put the puzzle together.
Yeah.
So I help them put it together. But they know if something's going on. Like parents, I don't care if you're a first, like I typically say, so if any, I have some catchphrases. So if you guys book with me and then you hear this again, just don't be surprised. But like, yes, you might be a new parent, but you're still this baby's only parent. So you're the expert on them. Yeah. You've known them better and more than anyone else has. And I think calling them an expert in their own kid gives a lot of validation and security for those parents because they're like, okay, I kind of like, maybe I do know a little bit of what's going on. And I think it's important to recognize, hey, you might not feel like you do, but look at all these things you just told me that you're picking up on that your baby's doing. You're responding so well to them. Yeah. And just like being able to say that and like give them that tangible like praise of like, you saw this thing when your baby was doing this, look at that, you know them. Really helps like parents start taking ownership of their like feeding journeys and just parenthood in general,
Yeah, absolutely. We want to empower you. That's the goal. Ideally, for sure.
Ideally.
I have so many other questions for you. So let me just choose one more because, actually we finished our last question already. That's good. So let's just quickly talk about specifically what families of color are facing and the kind of racial disparities that we're seeing in breastfeeding outcomes. Tell me kind of like what you've learned as a lactation consultant, what you're seeing in practice, and what kind of resources might be out there, even if that literally is just seeing a lactation consultant of color. Tell me just kind of, this feels like just too broad of a question. What's the lay of the land?
Well, it's not going great.
Great.
Okay, so here's the thing, is that there's this assumption that Black and brown people do not breastfeed. And that's just simply not true.
That's offensive. Hearing that just makes me like angry.
Yeah, there's this, and especially my younger, so I sometimes work a lot with WIC as a dietitian, like I do contract work for them. And I see a lot of like young women of colors, 18, 19, 20-year-old moms. And the assumption is that they're just not going to breastfeed in the hospital. And so they're not given any education. They're not really given any guidance. And then they call me and they're trying to figure it out. And nobody really told them anything. They just told them, here's a bottle of formula. And so I think a lot of it is assumption based, right? Like people aren't checking their own bias.
Yeah.
Assuming that they think they know how this parent wants to feed. And then moving forward, like people actually don't know how to deal with different cultures. And so, yeah, a big thing for me is like, there aren't a lot of women of color in this field. And I like literally went to a conference a couple weeks ago and it was just an array of white. And it's like, but these women need this help. And I've had patients come to me of really reputable people in the area telling me they've had biased, like care from them of like, oh, that's where you live, or like, you just need to do this with your baby, things that are just not culturally
sensitive.
Yeah. And so definitely like finding a provider of color, I think, is really important. An LC of color, doulas. Back to your question of like resources. So doulas, I find, are like such a great like resources, connectors, yes, of the community. And so there's triangle doulas of color, there's emerald doulas, at least in my area. But I find that they typically know a lot of kind of like where to go. La Leche League is like historically, I believe, like Hispanic, it started for like Hispanic communities. I could be wrong with that, but they typically have a lot of resources as well. It was like enough of an issue in my field where, I don't know if you've heard of the Melanated Mammary Atlas.
I think that I have, but tell us again.
Yeah, so Nikisha Killings, I believe, she started this atlas where you can search, and it's just melanated skin of like different, breast conditions that can happen and how it presents differently on melanated skin. Because people were getting misdiagnosed left and right because people don't know what a black or brown breast looked like, or like what is just a dry breast versus eczema, like, or that kind of thing. And so, yeah, there's a lot of growth that we need in this field, honestly, because I think there's a certain like care that I think white women are given, like sensitivity to their tears, whereas that may not be seen with black and brown. And there's research to show like our pain is not seen as like being as serious.
It's well documented.
Yeah, it's like well documented. So and honestly, I this is why it's so important to me, at least, to meet with my patients before ever stepping foot in a hospital and giving birth, is because we got to talk about birth prep. We got to talk about your providers. Because it all starts, I would argue, there. And I don't necessarily think we have an epidemic of postpartum depression as much as we have an epidemic of birth trauma in this country. And so if we can kind of address that, it really helps put these women of color, on a better like standing, because they aren't having to unpack their birth and all of that. Yeah, it's just a mess. I don't know if I can wrap it up in just a couple minutes, but
I'm with you.
think slowly it's getting better. There's more resources, and but yeah, it's a work in progress for sure.
Absolutely. And here in Charlotte, there's a dietitian and lactation consultant, Rachel, and I'm blanking on her last name. She's black, and she runs a I want to call it
Harmony Nutrition.
Yes, Harmony Nutrition and Lactation, and her like group that she runs is called Queen City Cocoa Beans.
Yes,
it's just black women getting together and talking about breastfeeding, and it's like a support group. That's not a club, support group. And it's really, really great. And she's amazing as a provider as well. But I want to challenge any white dietitians listening to this. Yeah, you might have the same skills as somebody who's a person of color, but like we're talking not necessarily about skill level here, unless we're talking about like you literally need to do a cultural humility CEU or 10, or have some good conversations with people. We're talking about like, where are your biases? How are they affecting your patients? And what kind of level of openness and learning can you be open to?
Yeah.
And how can you maybe accept more interns so that we can get a more diverse,
that's a good one,
like provider population, and make our provider population match the actual population. And understanding too that some people literally will just want to see somebody that looks like them. That's just what makes them feel comfortable and confident, and like there's not another layer of explaining that they have to do, and that's okay. Yeah, it's just okay. Yeah. So thank you so much for answering all of my questions. I feel like a lot of these topics we absolutely could have done like 4 different episodes if we were to like go on tangents.
I'm honestly so impressed with myself that I didn't talk as much as I thought I would. So, shout out to me. Okay.
You did great. We love all of the information here. Any final thoughts for us before we wrap up today?
I think that there's a lot more to parenting than just feeding, and you can be a great parent, regardless of how your feeding journey is going. Know that there's support out there. You unfortunately may have to look for it, but it's there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. Like I said, you're the expert on your baby.
I love that. And where can folks find you if they'd like to work with you or follow your content?
Oh, you can follow my content. I don't know if you'll find much there, but you can follow it.
Shut up.
Rooted Nutrition Lactation on Instagram, or my website is just rooted, N as in nutrition, L as in lactation, rootednl.com. You can just find me there and we can see what insurance you have, and typically people are covered. So yeah.
That's awesome. And do you do virtual lactation consultations, or do you prefer to do them in person, or both?
I do both. Awesome. All over. Yeah.
I love that. Do you have an off you're in Durham, right?
I do home visits and telehealth only.
Home visits and telehealth.
I don't do office visits.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Reem, for coming on the podcast today. Have a lovely rest of your Monday.
You too. Bye.